On this week's World of Saltwater Fishing, we're celebrating the 200th birthday of the fabulous Florida Keys. Hop aboard for a look at some of the history and people that turned this fishing paradise into one of the world's most popular destinations.
George Poveromo's World of Saltwater Fishing. Big fish don't stand a chance.
The Florida Keys are synonymous with sunshine, conch fritters, fresh seafood, pina coladas, and of course, world-class fishing. Yet this coral archipelago has a deep and extremely rich history that goes far back in time. This history includes fishing pioneers, sports legends, famous riders, treasure hunters, past presidents, and many other notable individuals. To showcase some of the history and legends of the Keys, I'll be joined by noted Florida Keys historians Brad Bertelli and Dr. Malcom. I'm sure you're about to find out some interesting nuggets of Keys history that you previously were not aware of. I know I did. Here we are, aboard the Pilar replica inside Worldwide Sportsman, which is the Bass Pro Shops property at Isla Mirada in the fabulous Florida Keys. And sitting with me right here is Brad Bertelli, who is a Florida Keys historian. And since we're in Worldwide Sportsman, let's go back to the original Worldwide Sportsman in George Hummel, a huge figure, especially in Isla Mirada and the Florida Keys. Tell me a little bit about George.
He arrived in Isla Mirada in 1946. His father was a local a sheriff. Ted Williams always said about George Hummel Jr. that he had the biggest heart in the business. He kind of set the bar high for standards for, being a gentleman and just kind of, his work ethic. So that was really his, aside from being just a super nice guy, he was the big heart of fishing guides in the Florida Keys. And George Hummel and some other fishing guides, this was in the 40s or the 50s, were taking some boats to Cuba. And when they get to Cuba, they are stopped on the docks by customs, and they're being asked to pay up $500. And that's a lot. In the 40s and 50s, that's a ton of money. And so George and the other guides are kind of working with the customs agent, and then all of a sudden, from the top of the yacht club there, some guy calls down and goes, "Hey, go across the street. There's a lawyer there. Tell him I sent you." And George looks up and goes, "Okay, who are you?" And the guy goes, "I'm Hemingway." And they sell it for $50. And then George and some of the other guys spent the next 2 hours up at the yacht club drinking rum and cokes with Hemingway.
And he had a lot of dignitaries that would come and actually fish with him because of his notoriety and his fishing skills, didn't he?
Yes, President George Bush was one of those. Although you have to imagine how difficult it would be to fish for bonefish or permit when you have the Secret Service behind you in 7 or 8 boats.
Okay, and then we sort of segue into Ted Williams.
He was here for decades. He loved to fish, and one of the things that both baseball and fishing tied together was his keen eyesight. It was said that he was standing at the plate, with his bat in his hand. He could see the red stitching on the baseball as it approached the plate. And he had that same keen eyesight when he was out fishing and could see the bonefish tail, before anybody else could.
We definitely have to talk about Zane Grey.
He would fish 8 to 10 hours a day. He was one of the first people who really looked at sport fishing as catch and release. If it wasn't meant for your dinner table, let it go. And interestingly, sailfish are quite the game fish today. Back in those days, they were referred to as boohoos because you didn't want them to take your bait when they're looking for kingfish and other more popular fish at the time. He held so many world records, offshore, inshore. He introduced light tackle fishing to the general public, but he also, were catching 1,000-pound sharks and marlins. So he had world records on both sides of it. There is so much great history in all of the Florida Keys. One thing that's interesting, as you're driving south down the Overseas Highway, that is the original path of Henry Flagler's Overseas Railroad. which is, so it's kind of interesting to, as you're driving down, to, to kind of tie that together, is that as you're, that's the view you would have had, back in 1912, 1912 to 1935. The highway first started getting built like in 1908, because this was all farming country. These were all farming communities, and the farmers needed a way to get their produce from the fields to the railroad tracks. And it was 1928 when the first State Road 4A, which was the first version of the Overseas Highway, opened. And in those days, it was, you drive from Miami to Lower Matecumbe Key. At Lower Matecumbe Key, you boarded a automobile ferry, and that was a 4-hour trip to No Name Key. And from No Name Key, you would disembark and then travel the rest of the way to Key West.
George Poveromo's World of Saltwater Fishing is proudly brought to you by Penn, let the battle begin. Mako, you'll find them where the fish are. Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's, your adventure starts here. Mercury Marine, go boldly. George, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the special World of Saltwater Fishing episode celebrating the 200th birthday of the fabulous Florida Keys. Historians Brad Bertelli and Dr. Corey Malcom are taking us on a journey through the past. Join us on our walk down memory lane, Florida Keys style.
Well, you look at Key Largo, that has a special spot in my heart because my father had a place at Silver Shores for 7 or 8 years. And I had this little boat that I would go out to Rodriguez Key. And I wanted to get a bonefish so badly. And I would get out, I'd see the tails, and I would try. Got to the point you tried too hard. And finally, 6-pound test spin, I had a live shrimp, and I saw this tail end bonefish. I made a perfect cast for a change and hooked this fish, and I boated it and I kept it. It was my first bonefish. I was proud. It was 8 3/4 pounds. And this was the fishing mecca where so many techniques were pioneered, especially light tackle fishing, where leaders, lures, and just scaling down and scoring more was huge because you had so much variety in terms of species. The outrigger, a technique like that being pioneered a lot down here in the Florida Keys by, again, Tommy Gifford gets a lot of that credit. You look at a place like Chica Lodge, which is magnificent, and on trips when we would come down here with my father and my uncle and our cousins, and we would stay quite a bit at Chica Lodge as a kid. And you mentioned Ziggy's as one of the premier restaurants, which that is one of my favorite restaurants in the Florida Keys. But I remember Old Man Ziggy. I remember I was a little kid. My dad we would go to the front door and he would be maitre d', and he was a cranky old guy. I could say that. He would see my dad had sneakers and he had shorts on, as did my uncle. He wouldn't let us in until you had long pants.
Wow.
And my dad was a dentist. He had a couple dollars in his pocket. But he had to go back to Chica, get some long pants on so we could go in and dine at Ziggy's. So you fast forward to when I started coming to the Keys regularly as an adult, and I still thought that was a fantastic restaurant. And of course, to this day, I still go down there because it's a good restaurant. And now they let you in with quality shorts.
You can go to a restaurant with shorts today, you might go out of business.
To celebrate the 200th birthday of the Florida Keys, one lucky winner and a companion will be my guest anglers on one of my World of Saltwater Fishing episodes. Filming will take place this fall or early winter in Isla Mirada. Pines and Palms will provide the accommodations, Columbia Sportswear will outfit the winners, and the Florida Keys will provide a travel allotment. For a chance to win this trip, enter the drawing at fla-keys.com/contest.
George Poveromo's World of Saltwater Fishing is proudly brought to you by Simrad. Go with Simrad and go with confidence. Rapala holds the world record for world records. Suffix, always use the best line. Starbright Boat Care Products, blending technology with performance since 1973. George, we'll be right back.
We're back to our special World of Saltwater Fishing episode celebrating the 200th birthday of the Florida Keys. I'm joined by Florida Keys historians Brad Bertelli and Dr. Corey Malcom. Now, let's get back to the party. We're back to celebrating the 200th birthday of the Florida Keys in 2023, and we're going to focus now on the lower Florida Keys in Key West with Dr. Corey Malcom, who is the leading historian for the Florida Keys History Center. If there's one thing that comes to Key West, one big name
it's Hemingway.
That's right.
And what could you tell me? When did Hemingway come here? Why did he come here? What are some of the little bits of history you could tell me about him?
Well, you know, Hemingway first came to Key West in 1928. He had come from Havana, had stopped in Key West, and was expecting to pick up a car that was being delivered to him here. And the car was late, and Hemingway stuck around for a while. And while he was here, he started to explore Key West and explore the lower Keys, and you know, met some of the locals here, and really just went, wow, what a special place here. And of course, one of the first things that Hemingway did was he was able to go fishing. And I think, you know, to stay on the subject, the hook was set. And
I can understand that.
and that really made this a special place for him. And he decided, hey, I'm going to live here.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Harry Truman, President Truman, was in Key West. What inspired him to come down here? What year and why was he here?
Yeah. Well, you know, President Truman came to Key West 11 times while he was president. He loved it here. And he first came in 1946, and he would stay really just not far away from where we're standing right now, on what was then the U.S. Navy base. And he had, you know, would stay in the officers' quarters there. They called it the Little White House when he was in town. And, you know, he loved to get away. It was quiet. It was peaceful here. But much like Hemingway, he loved to fish, too.
Now, as far as the railroad coming down in Flagler, without Flagler, would there be a Key West?
Well, it'd be a much different Key West. You know, in 1912, a many years-long project to connect Key West with the mainland of Florida by railroad was completed. And with that, then, Key West was no longer truly an island. You know, you could bring trains down, and that brought people, that brought goods, but it also allowed things to be exported as well. And it really revolutionized the economy of this island and gave it a boost and made it a much more modern place than it had been previously.
You've got Mel Fisher, who his big thing is finding the wrecks and the spoils that go along with them.
Right.
And what could you tell me about maybe Mel and some of the wrecks out here?
You know, talk about the underwater world and the fish and all of that. You know, one of the great things that we have here in the Florida Keys is a lot of shipwrecks. The galleons and those sorts of things, they have a tremendous story to tell, and they can really let you know what was going on 400 or 500 years ago. And Mel Fisher was a man, came to Key West in 1971, decided he was going to go find a shipwreck called the Atocha. That was a galleon that had sunk in 1622. He had a team together. He'd already been working up in the east coast of Florida looking at wrecks up there. Moved operation here to Key West, started searching, and started finding pieces of the Atocha. And finally, in July of 1985, found this amazing shipwreck about 25 miles west of Key West here. And with that, just tons of silver and gold and really amazing things that let you see what was going on back in the days of the Spanish Main. And it's a fantastic discovery, and it still goes on today. There's a museum here people can go to and see and learn about the discovery and see the things that came off that ship. It's just amazing.
No doubt about it. My earliest history with the Florida Keys, again, credit to my father, who was a dentist in Miami Beach, Bay Harbor, who loves fishing the Marquesas, which are about 18, 20 miles west of Key West. He loved to come down here and just fish the rock piles on the Gulf side, mutton snapper, grouper. And since the late 60s, when I was like 8, 9 years old, I just remember trips down here fishing with him through the 70s, into the 80s, to the point when he said, we're going to Marquesas again, I would shudder again. But it's become such a family, I guess, tradition, or at least with me, that at least once a year, through currently, I will make it a point to keep that tradition up and go to Marquesas
We shot many of my television episodes down there because the sentimental value, but the fishing is great. And what a magnificently beautiful area when you see the Marquesas themselves.
That's it. The Marquesas Keys are just one of the most beautiful spots in this entire country. And you're alone out there generally, and it's just as wild as it was 500 years ago. And it's just a spectacular place.
Growing up, you had a crux of these light tackle Key West guides that pioneered the techniques of catching fish and tackle so light at times you wouldn't think it was even possible.
Yeah.
You had, of course, Ralph Delf, Robert Trossett, Gary Marconi. You had Tom Pierce, Bob and Gene Montgomery, Kenny Harris, Wally Albrecht, Barry Evans, and there were definitely more than that, but that crux of guides there had set the stage for all kinds of line development, hook, fighting style. It was just a magical era that brought recreational angling, in my opinion, to where it is today. When they used to run the Mako Owner tournaments, I used to fish out of Boog Powell's Angler's Marine, which is on Stock Island, which is now Murray Marine, when Boog Powell, the famous baseball player, still had it. I have pictures with Boog Powell and I holding up awards. And some of the best catches we've had out here, blue marlin, white marlin. I caught my largest white marlin out of Key West back in 1983. Yes, I killed it. It was my first white marlin. I did have it mounted in meat smoke. It hangs on my office wall. And I still have the trophy from the then Key West fishing tournament, which I believe still goes on to this very day.
Right, yeah.
And one day in particular, out of Key West, a buddy, actually is myself and two other buddies in my boat, we ended up with 3 yellowfin tuna in the 100-pound class. It was really ridiculous. Big dolphin out here. It's just a fishing mecca for sure.
It is, absolutely.
Stay tuned. We're coming right back.
George Poveromo's World of Saltwater Fishing is proudly brought to you by the Florida Keys and Key West. Come as you are. ACR, the leader in marine safety electronics. Papa's Pilar Artesian Crafted Rum. Never a Spectator. VMC, your expert in hooks. King Sailfish, the pioneer of catch and release mounts. Visit kingsailfish.com.
Much has been said about the Florida Keys and its rich history, and since my history with it spans for over 50 years, I also have stories to tell. Over these decades, I've amassed lasting memories, great friends, and amazing catches, and one of those catches almost took me to Davy Jones's locker. Allow me to share with you a sampling of some of my epic Florida Keys catches.
That's a big fish, man. Big old black.
Here he goes, all yours.
Big black grouper.
Oh, you need a
Look
gaff?
how big that guy is.
Could you go him? I got you. You know what? Gotta thank you. I'll get my tail. Yeah, roll him a sec. All right. One, two, three.
Monster from the deep. Coming up.
Woo! Got that up a gun.
That's a real one, George.
You telling me it's a real one? Come on. Yeah. Here he is on the top. All yours.
All right.
Aha, another one off the wreck.
All right. How about that?
I'm loving it, Mark. What do you think?
I think it's a great fish.
Oh, yeah.
My man, get
That
him
is
in.
a nice fish. Look at that one.
You can talk about the Florida Keys over and over till you're blue in the face, but this is the reason.
This is
Come
the
here.
reason right here.
This thing fought all the way.
All the way to the surface, yeah. I mean, he started to blow up at the end, as you can see, but he fought all the way to the surface. In Key Largo, we call that the marriage counselor, George. You
why
take
is that?
that home, everything's good.
Should be coming up right here. It's color.
Oh, nice one! Look at that size of that one, baby.
Whoa.
Yeah!
Unreal. What? Are we
Man.
just showing off the Florida Keys during the off season or what? Let's get him in. This is unusual.
Very unusual, and one of the biggest ones I've ever seen.
What is it? Dog
That's
snapper?
yep. Pretty fish.
That is a big one too, I gotta tell you that.
No, that's the biggest one I've seen.
First drop in our cases, and you know why, and you know what I'm gonna say next. This is what just keeps me coming back here. Family tradition, but first drop, bam.
And not only a family tradition and our tradition, but the variety down here is unbelievable.
Well, folks, it's time to cut the cake and make a toast to the Florida Keys on their 200th birthday. I truly enjoyed taking everyone on this incredible walk down memory lane. Happy birthday, Florida Keys, and here's to another 200 years. I'll see you then. If you want to keep track of our fishing adventures, we welcome you to follow us on our social media. I'm on Facebook at facebook.com/George.Poveromo. I'm on Instagram at George Poveromo. And you can see our shows in 4K broadcast quality on YouTube at my YouTube channel, which is George Poveromo TV. Jump aboard and ride along with us.